Hey everyone, it's me, Safara, coming to you today to talk to you about the fifth of the seven universal principles. I had to remember where I was at, in what order. And this is something I discuss in my book, A Guide to Manifesting Your Reality with the Seven Universal Principles and how I use them to achieve my goals at NASA. It's a whole mouthful. But I pray there's some goodness in here for you. And this particular principle is the principle of rhythm. And it's the idea that, if you can sum it up in a few words, for everything there's a season. And it's different from the principle of gender, which I know I posted that on IG, or at least I will be. And Facebook, just kind of posting them in different platforms. But the principle of rhythm, again, it's like for everything there's a season. And in fact, in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1, it literally says just that in so many words. There's a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens, is what it says. And that's the NIV version. I'm looking over here because I have it up on my screen. But I really think this is a critical one now because of everything that's happening in the world. And let me start by saying, we are in a new year on like the Hebrew calendar, God's calendar, which started, I believe, on October 2nd. So this is a new year. And this time of the year in God's calendar corresponds to when the children of Israel finally crossed over into the promised land. So that's very significant because, again, there's a rhythm, to the things that happen. And what is happening in the spiritual realm is absolutely happening, in the physical realm where we're at, the 3D world, I guess, if you will. And I talk about this in the second of the universal principles, the principle of correspondence, which is that what's happening in the spiritual or mental or emotional realm is there's going to be a correspondence or correlation, direct correlation to what's happening in a lower realm, if you will, like the physical realm. Because, as we know from the first principle, thought precedes reality. So things happen always in the spiritual realm first. It doesn't mean that it can't go in the other order, because I covered that. I believe it was in another principle where Jesus says what's loosed on earth is loosed in heaven. So we absolutely have the ability, because we have dominion, and we're getting into that. I'll be getting into that more, but that was really from Genesis 1:26. But it's restored dominion, meaning we have supreme authority, to take out, demons and devils, as Jesus said in Luke chapter 10, verse 19. So, not to digress too much, the principle of rhythm, though, and this time of the year being crossover season, if you will, because it repeats every year. But what's different about this year is that we're also moving into a new age. So a new 1,000-year period, again, for the time of the world. So there's never really been a time like this one. And it's crossing over from not just a new year to another year, but from the old age to a new age. And so spiritually, there's a lot going on with respect to that. And you don't even have to imagine, because what you see happening in the physical realm, there's absolutely that much more happening in the spiritual realm, the things that we do not see. But one of the things that came to mind when I thought about this principle is, of course, the children of Israel, because what really happened is, they spent 40 years, wandering around in the wilderness, really not because they needed to. Like, it wasn't that it took that long. If you don't know, they could have gotten there in days, I want to say. But it wasn't really a matter of them getting there so much as how they got there, which is why, like, literally, a whole group of them, the group that came from Egypt, had to die out, with the exception of what Caleb and Joshua, as God said, when they had gone out to spy, in the land of Canaan, and they saw these giant grapes, and they're like, oh, there must be giants. Like, we can't do it. And everyone except for Joshua and Caleb, basically kind of chickened out. And that was when God was like, you know what? Like, you guys are going to wander out here until you're not anymore. And then I'll deal with the next generation. And so, but still, while they were alive, it's like God was still working with them to deal with their own internal trauma, from being, in captivity for as long as they were. And so that was one aspect of it. And then, of course, when that group died out and they moved into the promised land, and then they had to deal with all of these external enemies. So it's like, first it was dealing with themselves, and then for 40 years, and then it was, okay, like, now we've got to deal with all of these external enemies. And again, that was the time for it to happen. So the principle of rhythm is that, there's a season for everything, and this is definitely crossover season, but it's also a season for divine recompense. And I will leave you with, and I talked about this in one of my other videos, Isaiah chapter 61, which is a chapter that came to mind as I was praying some weeks ago. And prior to that, I was trying to figure out what really recompense meant, because I hadn't understood it, and I prayed, and then it was like the next day, when I prayed again, I heard Isaiah 61. So Isaiah 61 talks about the year of the Lord's favor, which is interesting because this particular Hebrew year, 5785, or I guess the 85 part is Chet Hay. The Hebrew letters Chet and then Hay. And it references, it is understood to mean favor. I want to say not the Lord's favor, but it's essentially God's favor and grace, or I'm really butchering it. So I'm going to leave some information about it and a reference to the information online. But it all correlates. So, and then in Isaiah 61, this discussion about recompense, and wealth really being transferred, to God's people, which happens in crossover season, right? Because as they go into the new promised land, it's occupied. So they have to, battle, do these battles, Jericho, and then, I forget which was the next place, AI, and then there are a few, which is an interesting name, but, and then there are a few other ones, so I would say these are some things to kind of think about with respect to how this is showing up in your life, like what are you crossing over into, and what kinds of challenges have you had, in the last, year, and or months, if you will, and what are you looking to conquer, and how are you looking to do that in this new age and this new year and this new season. So that's kind of a lot, but I pray that it bless you, And until next time.